What's interesting to me is that there were people willing to call out the previous bad behaviors. Ammon Bundy is confused because he thought they were all fighting for the same thing. They were all calling out the same bad behaviors. And all of a sudden, those bad behaviors have been blessed. And he's wondering, wait, what happened?
Instead of conflict and aggression, here's governance built on grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka.
Welcome to Gracearchy. Once again, it's kind of nice to have that live sense of it, isn't it? Bill Protzman here with Jim. Today, we want to speak to a very specific segment of voters in the United States. We want to speak to people who voted for Donald Trump twice. And maybe that's just once, but we definitely want to talk to Donald Trump voters. And we want to do that because we're going to make a Christian and constitutional case for protecting people who come to America. This isn't entirely up to us. We've had a lot of help here. And Jim, I want you to talk about Ammon Bundy and remind people of who he is and why he's important to this episode.
We're going to talk about a manifesto. It's a 6-page plus another 4 pages worth of footnotes, 6-page manifesto that he wrote. This is a guy who, he and his family made national news about 12 years ago. And we're not going to focus on that part of it. But the type of national news basically pitted him kind of in that militia almost wing of the right. So here's a guy that should believe 100% that, okay, well, Donald Trump's our guy. And we did an episode where we talked about how the Tea Party has betrayed itself.
Right.
And this is another evidence of that whole thing coming on, because Ammon is looking at what's going on with ICE and with the immigrant. And he is having an extreme pang of consciousness. And all the people who looked at him as heroes in the 2010s have left him. They've left him. They think his cheese has slid off his cracker, if not worse. Some of them are actually angry at him. And The Atlantic did this whole profile about him. So the document that we're going to go through is called The Stranger. And we are going to put a link to it in the show notes. We are not going to sit here and read it to you. All I want to do is go through the points, as many of them as we can in the allotted time we have. There are at least 8 things on this list to cover here today. And I hope we get to them all. But I want to hit some of them, as many of them as we can. And I just want to say a thing or two about each one of the points. But it's a 6-page memo. You have time to read this, chances are. But it's going to be in the show note. And I want you to go into the show notes, grab the link for yourself, pull it aside, print it out maybe even, so you can sit and read it at your leisure sometime between now and the coming weekend.
Yeah, it's not a hard read, but it's
very direct.
Demands attention, right? You need to spend time with it.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we dive right in?
I was going to ask you why he wrote this.
Great question. Great question. He wrote this because there's this human drive to be understood. And here he thought he was fighting for a particular cause. He's gone one way. Everybody else went another. And he knows that he's still on the principled path, and he's kind of wondering, wait a minute, did these people ever get it? Like, he's trying to appeal to the ones he thinks understand, the ones who have some principle left.
The Donald Trump voters that he thought were his friends and supporters.
So it's compelling. And I think it's something very, very important to digest, because the things that he states here, well, they're timeless. And if you are a constitutional conservative, particularly of the Christian variety, these should have been the positions you were holding, not just in 2020 or 2014 when Ammon first became famous, but in 2026.
Okay, let's jump in.
Okay.
One of my favorites, the godly right to migrate.
Yeah, what I found interesting about this section is he started his entire essay in the very same place we start this show. We have a couple of metaphysical priors that we bring to the show. The very first one on the list is where he starts. Genesis 1:28 talks about basically a dominion mandate to be fruitful and multiply. We were made in the image of God. This Imago Dei and this commissioning that we're given. The Imago Dei is our premise. And here he's saying, hey, everybody is part of this created order. Every human being has been given this command to be fruitful, to multiply, to replenish the earth, to manage it. And that's where he chooses to begin. In this section, he actually titled God's Law in the Unalienable Right to Migrate, because what he's saying is that it is the case that we should have a strong preference for the sojourner, the stranger, as he's calling them here. We should embrace those people coming here and show special Christian love towards them. The Bible repeatedly suggests that people that are different from you, the Samaritan is
yes.
Right. And this theme comes up here. And I want to point out a verse because there is this thing that happens. And it's part of the reason that I really don't personally consider myself a conservative anymore. There is this thing that happens where they'll say, well, the book of Leviticus says that it is wrong to be gay. Okay, all right. Maybe we should take that seriously. If you're going to take that seriously, would you also read this verse with the same degree of literal reading? Okay. And if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him, but the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. In other words, as if he's an American, and thou shalt love him as thyself. Now, what people do in these situations, they come with artful dodges to get away from this point. They'll go, well, that was only to the people of Israel. Okay, but why was the other verse? There's another verse about tattoos. Why was that verse? Like, we could, there's about the types of foods you can eat and the fabrics that you can wear. And there's a whole host of things, right? You're supposed to send your wife out to the tent when she has her monthly cycle. She's not allowed to be in the house, right? There's all these things that are we going to hold that with the same degree of literalness? And if you are, like, if you're saying, oh, well, I believe what the Bible says, well, here it is. It's as black and white as it can possibly be. But somehow or other, this one gets dropped off the list. And I think it's good that he brought it up.
This is really important for Christians who think to consider what level of meaning do you ascribe to these words?
Yes.
Is this a do it or don't? Is this a justice kind of a prescription, or is this a love prescription?
Yeah, and to be clear, for me personally, although it's not important, we're really talking to the Trump people today. Mm-hmm. For me personally, this would be one of the ones that should have stuck.
Right? Because it is about actually, following the way.
It's about grace. It's the
grace.
Continuing grace message. So you could have gone back through and looked and said, which one of these things really have a lot to do with grace? And which ones, oh boy, they really are about grace. And this would be one of them.
This would be one.
Yep.
Okay, undocumented pilgrims at Plymouth.
Yeah, the second point in his statement is America's founders and the reality of unauthorized settlement.
Yeah, there were no visas back then.
No visas. The pilgrims just came, and other people continued to come, and this happened right up until till 1920. Right up until 1920 in American history, with the exception of the Chinese Exclusion Acts in the 1890s. But even in 1920, there's still no documentation. There's no passports in existence at this point. There's no, the level of background check that's going on is like nothing, right?
Yeah, just come. You're
People
welcome.
Just came here. They just came here. But the thing that he's choosing to point out here that is uniquely important and relevant to Christians who are of a conservative bent is that their forebears were the ones that came here first. Puritans, Quakers, Baptists, Huguenots, these were all what he calls religious refugees. And it's interesting because I am not familiar with this book, but he actually recommends Charles Carlton Coffin's The Story of Liberty, which tells a 1607 story about a congregation of separatists who first tried to go to Holland and then eventually came here, and what they went through between here and there. In fact, at one point, the men had left first to kind of go get set up, and the women and children were trapped by the English government from leaving. And if they had stayed, they would have been punished up to the point of life imprisonment and even execution for their dissenting religious views. But they fled. Now, this is, by the way, this is before the King James Bible has been written. 1607, that's a couple years before the King James Bible. Like, this is the middle of, this is the Reformation battles going on in all of Europe.
Big deal.
And they come here. They come here. And how did they come?
Oh, the hard way.
Without permission.
Yeah. Just under duress.
We
like to think about immigration, my family immigrated from Germany or whatever, but they didn't immigrate from Germany under the threat of persecution by the Germans.
Some of them did. Some of them did. But here he's saying your tradition, your history is without permission.
Yes, completely without. Okay, the third point here in Bundy's essay is protect persons, not papers. That is, our Constitution protects people, not stuff.
Yeah, and this is really super, super important. Going back to that first point about the Imago Dei, my view on immigration is not open borders, because to me, that's focusing on the wrong thing. I am about humans being able to make and establish the relationships they want for themselves without interference from other humans. Okay. People are allowed to make the friends they want to make. They're allowed to do the business activities and the relational activities they want to do with each other, so long as they don't harm others by so doing. And by harm, I mean materially. You lost something, you lost property, you can show damages. You've been victimized physically. You have some kind of crime to person or property. You don't have those things, that they should be left alone. And it's interesting because the focus that so many people have in this discussion is, well, my parents came here legally, as if there's some kind of special thing that they did, which
Right.
in many cases they did not. As we've already indicated, before 1920, the whole papers regime didn't exist, and there were no immigration laws until the 1890s, having to do only with the Chinese. The idea that a paper is the thing that's needed, that the paper is the important part. There's people focusing on the border, the process, the papers, rather than the persons made in the image of God. And he's making this clear here. He's going one step further. He is making a claim that the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, when they use language like persons and not citizens, which is the way the majority of the document works, if you go on a word hunt for citizen, you find that in the amendments after the Bill of Rights. You don't find it in the founders version as much. It might have been mentioned, but it's persons, 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 again and again and again. This is really super important, that if we focused more on the persons and we recognize the Constitution as personal rights or personal liberty, we would have to be inviting.
It'd be the only way that would work. What has happened to this person's idea? Is it lost in the sauce? Do we have too many rules?
I think that's one of the things we have to do here. I think we have to revive it. And it is one of my quests, so to speak, to get people to think about this better. Okay, so I just reject out of hand any arguments that say, well, we have to have some process. I'm willing to compromise because I would like to make the situation better, but I'm not going to ever give up on suggesting that it's persons seeking relationship.
Yeah, doesn't matter if you can spend what's the current price for citizenship? The gold card.
There's been a bunch of different proposals thrown out there.
Yeah.
I'd stay off of Twitter for that reason, I guess.
Historical moral losers. We're not talking about people here, people.
No, but he's saying that you can learn from America's moral failures, and they have been many. So if we sit and talk about a Chinese Exclusion Act right now, how many people go, oh, hoorah, right? They're like really for that. Like, we recognize that's wrong.
Or the Japanese internment. I mean, we've done some bad things.
Okay, and then he tells a story probably because he has some connection being out west to the Latter-day Saints and how they were driven across the country.
Yeah.
But even more relevant to this particular debate, Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Japanese American internment, every single time one of these things happened, the first point to make is that they were a law. And just because it's a law doesn't mean it's moral.
Right.
And the second point is we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed by it. So he lays out a standard. He says true crime is the deliberate injury of another's rights and peaceful existence. Your very existence as a human being. We say the words illegal alien. Illegal alien. He says peaceful existence is not a crime. And that is a statement of principle. And in fact, I'm not going to, the Catholics, the Mormons, the Irish, the Mexicans, the pattern's been the same. He lays out a 4-step pattern that I encourage people to check because once again, this document is linked down in our show notes.
I have to just quickly tell people about my experience of visiting one of the replicas of the Japanese internment camps in Idaho. There are a few people out there who are dedicated to maintaining these sites, at least with some dignity, to honor the people. And if you have a chance, if you happen to be in one of the areas where you might encounter a camp like this, go. go. Read what it is talking about. Allow it to work on you. And the next time that you see someone of Asian descent, remember the experience. Punish harm, protect liberty.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just finished with a point that was very similar to this, that peaceful existence is not a crime. But there's this wave that he does back and forth where he's bringing the Constitution in, which not long ago, people on the right professed fealty to. They really said they strongly believed in this. And Scripture, which in this case, he quotes Romans 13:10, which says, "Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law." Does no harm, fulfills the law. There's a concept, we covered this at the Zero Aggression Project, called the equal liberty. Equal liberty means that you have all the freedom to do anything that you want, so long as you don't do some harm to me in the process. We have a line between us. There's a line that you can cross. When you cross that, we call it harm, and then we start to talk about what the damages are. But up until that point, you're free to live. You're free to choose the life that you want. And so he's suggesting that there is one standard, regardless of where you're born. Now, this is an interesting thing. We have borders all over our country, state to state. So whether you're born in Texas or Mississippi or Ohio or California, your rights are the same. And he's saying, yes, and whether you're born in Brazil or Spain or Italy or China or Kenya.
Yeah, pick a place.
Your rights are the same. When you come here, you should be under the Constitution. And the reason for the Constitution, which he also talks about in this section, is to limit power of government. The only reason that you have laws is because there are times when people do harm other people. And we need a system or a way of addressing that. But the law, all the rest of the time, is love.
This show is brought to you by the Zero Aggression Project. Zap newsletter subscribers get alerts when each episode is released. The Zap website is also the pathway by which you can contact us by email and support the show. This program operates thanks to tax-deductible Zap contributions, and we appreciate your support. So, zap the state, and have a nice day.
And that's it.
That's as far as it ever needs to go.
Ever needs to go. So I wish that the things that I was told my entire life, 50 some years before this current administration, and by the way, every single one of them have been violating the Constitution all along, and terribly worse and worse as time's gone by in my lifetime. I'm not singling out one guy. What's interesting to me is that there were people willing to call out the previous bad behaviors. Ammon Bundy is confused because he thought they were all fighting for the same thing. They were all calling out the same bad behaviors. And all of a sudden, those bad behaviors have been blessed. And he's wondering, wait, what happened? Where did love does no harm to a neighbor? Can you not see the harm on the screen?
America's inspired heritage. Okay, we're focusing on the glass half full here.
Well, there are a lot of people who believe, I don't happen to share this view, just to put my priors out front, but I understand where people are coming from. I was raised in a world where this happens. And I know, especially my Mormon friends think this way. And there are other denominations that do as well, that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are basically inspired by God. These were godly documents that were given down to us. America is a Christian nation. Now, we said we're talking to a specific group of people here today. I am not asking anybody to agree to that premise. I'm not interested in debating that premise. We've discussed that issue in other episodes. What I want to say here today is that when you have a statement that says all people are, quote, created equal and, quote, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, end quote. This is something that we still to this day aspire to. These are ideals that we are supposed to be constantly reaching for. just as we are constantly reaching for spiritual goals and spiritual attainment. We are to be constantly praying for these things, hoping for these things, and living for these things. And he argues, and I think a lot of people misuse Romans 13, but there's one thing that you could say about the Romans 13 argument, which has to do with whether or not God ordained government. And it says it was specifically designed to punish wrongdoing. Wrongdoing. Actual wrongdoing. Well, we've already defined what wrongdoing is. You harmed another human being. We can identify them. But if it's simply going about living your life, like they've taken to calling people who have immigrated into this country invaders. They've routinely taken something that was basically the equivalent of a traffic stop in terms of its level of criminality and called it a crime. They've chucked out these divisions that we've made between police serving people locally under a code we all understood and appreciate that applied equally to all of us, and mixed in the definition of every type of military and bureaucratic innovation. They've federalized these things. They've constantly been stepping away from a constitution that he is arguing was designed to help us live like Christians. So the very device that is supposed to be there to help us, this is my problem. I don't think it does make us better. But the very device that you claim to believe was here by God's will, made us a city on the hill, is now being turned, misused, abused, and stretched by people that he believed understood this question. See, again, you may get hung up on the fact that, oh, you're criticizing Trump. I'm not talking about him at all. I'm talking about you that claim to believe that these institutions that we have were Christian in their very nature. If, frankly, they no longer are. And it's your fault. It's your fault.
What's the action here? Know your representatives?
Repentance. Simple repentance. Repentance means to turn your way, to go, wait. Okay, something's wrong here.
I had it wrong.
And I want forgiveness, and I want to move forward in a better fashion now. I want to be different. I want to be better.
God's judgment on America, on our nation.
This is a theme that the conservative Christians talk about a lot. The judgment of God, the coming of the revelation of God, the nations of the earth being trapped under an antichrist. The Old Testament prophets spend an awful lot of time on the judgment of nations, particularly of Israel. Like, how does God view nations? And when do these consequences arrive? I believe, and I think I can tell that Ammon does too, that natural consequences arrive for behaviors that are wrong, and that this is how God intends it. And I have argued that my position is that mercy is the normal state of God. We don't get anywhere near what we deserve for the things that we do wrong, the ways that we harm other people. But after a point, it's like it builds up so much pressure that the system just kind of pops. Judgment is now going to flow. And at this point, it's not God that sent it. It was God that was holding it back all this time. And he's not really holding back anymore. He's allowing consequences to arrive. Okay? And I kind of get the sense, I don't want to speak for Ammon, that he's saying the same thing. And we don't have time to make all of his points here. But the first area that he says this happens is there's moral consequences. Isaiah 10, 1 and 2, he quotes, "Woe to those who make unjust laws and that write grievousness, which they have prescribed." We have this happening all over the place right now. We have laws that are oppressive in nature. And then we are surprised when people react badly to those laws. We are surprised when they are defiant. Wait, we are the greatest people in the world, and we obviously meant so much good, right? And it wasn't so long ago that we recognized as Christians, in many cases, that this was being done during, let's say, the pandemic and in the way schools were being run, and a host of other institutions where you felt ignored, rejected, and even repudiated. And then you get the power, and instead of taking that lesson with you as people who were once the stranger in your own land, you decide to make another group of people the stranger. And it's not even a powerful group of people. It's not even a people that deserve any of the blame for the political battles that we had. It's a group of people that have virtually no power, so to speak. And then he talks about how God always spoke up for the oppressed. So he quotes Jeremiah 7, where it speaks of the stranger, the fatherless, the widow. These were the people that were supposed to be cared for. Remember, this name of this document, this manifesto, is the stranger. And then again, he says that he quotes Jesus himself. These are red letters here in Matthew 25. I was a stranger, and ye took me in, and ye clothed me not, sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Which, by the way, quotes in the King James so that even the most conservative of evangelicals in this country will recognize that he is one of them. Okay? So these people have forgotten the stranger and imposed grievous laws instead, and there's consequences to this. Then he talks about social consequences and how this begins to break, how a nation begins to break. This section alone is worth reading all by itself in the document. Then he speaks of withering freedom, how freedom goes away and gets replaced by injustice. But he spells out a note of hope and Ammon suggests that the blessing can be restored. The blessing can be restored, and he quotes Isaiah in so doing. So he comes back to this theme of equal protection before the law. That is, he sees it not merely recognizing human beings for who they are as they're pursuing their dreams. It's not merely a legal principle. It's an act of worship, in his opinion. The nation's acknowledgement that every human being bears God's image.
I got to ask the how question. Do you have any idea how to call for that practice? I mean, we could say grace, right? But what does that mean? Give me an example.
I'm relating to this in a large degree and was moved by what he wrote because I come from a tribe of people who thought this way. I've known scores, if not hundreds of them over the course of my lifetime. And, when I was attending Tea Party events and speaking to them, there were a lot of those kind of people in the crowd, and they loved what I had to say. Obviously, I don't believe that all this artifice of the state makes us kinder and nicer to each other. So I, on a broad macro level, Bill, I believe that we should not have the state, okay? Because what it means is that there's some force. It's a pot of power and money that are very, very attractive to the avarice-filled, and avarice is the root of all evil, that corrupts our culture in many significant ways. People try to grab that and use it as a shortcut as opposed to serving God. But I also think that you, on a practical down home level, the most important thing that could happen in the entire immigration debate is for people to get to know other people who could be impacted and affected by the situation. Now, you notice I didn't say go run out and protest, although I do think it's been evident that has made an impact in Minneapolis. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying the thing that matters, the thing that I think changes the heart in the inside, and I do believe, and I think Ammon shares this view, that this is a hard issue, that if you got to know real people who would be impacted by these circumstances, in fact, if you went one step further and served them, then I think your whole attitude about this would be much more biblical and much more constitutional than it is at present. It would change you. And then you would see them the way your Heavenly Father sees them.
So what you've said is personal experience for me, because when I moved to San Diego in 2010, and started going to the local coffee shops, right, as one does. There's a local coffee shop chain, maybe 3 of them, that are owned by an Italian man. And when you go to his coffee shop, all the people behind the counter are here on work visas. And some are from Italy and other parts of Europe, and some are from Central Africa. And I got to meet one of these people. I met a bunch of them. But I got to meet this guy, and he was the coolest dude, right? He didn't speak English very well, but he always knew my name. And we kind of like, formed one of those relationships where it's like, oh, good to see you this morning. Well, a time passes. So in the 15 years that I've known this guy, he's gone from working behind the counter of a coffee shop to being a business owner in his own right and becoming a U.S. citizen, together with his wife, who's also now immigrated and naturalized citizen, and their 2 young kids. And Jim, when you get to know somebody that way, and I don't know them well, but I have been able to watch the progress of their lives together and their influence in the community, and they're valued business owner, members of the community now, and that to me is just beautiful. To be a part of that, on the sidelines of that really speaks to me. So here's the call to action, right? It's really a call to an internal sort of action, though.
Yeah, he kind of pulls everything together, as you tend to do in a conclusion, from the time that people crossed the Atlantic to come here, that religious tradition that he spoke of, but that every person is coming basically to live out these image-bearing responsibilities, the stewardship that we are all given as human beings to care for the world that we're in and the people therein. He's reminding us of this call, even from Jesus himself, to love the stranger. And then he quotes a verse from Paul, and I think it's a really good place to land. You are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of his household. This is from Ephesians 2. And the importance of this statement, which he doesn't spend time elaborating on, but I'm going to do it for you here, is that when you attend a fellowship of believers, it's not slave and master. It's not male and female. It's not races. It's not all these other things that we divide people up into categories for, and that people even seem eager to be divided up into categories too. What should be happening in a space of worship is a special nation is being organized, where all those things are put aside, and the thing that matters most is the humanity of the individuals in the image of God, redeemed by Christ, coming together to be part of a fellowship that wants to be like Jesus, not like a group of flags. I have this saying that when I walk into a church and I see a flag, let alone flags, on display or on the stage, I already know there's a problem here. Because once again, the thing that's being emphasized is a nationality, for example, in this case. But that's not the design of the people of faith. The people of faith recognize that everyone, poor or rich, everyone, regardless of descent, maybe they're even a Samaritan, can be good. And that the call is not to see people, as Bundy points out, as trespassers, but as neighbors. And the Bible is explicitly clear about this. It's summed up in the second great commandment that covers the entire law: love your neighbor as yourself.